Today, we're diving into an absolutely critical 13-year stretch in India's history, from 1905 to 1918. And it's a fascinating story, really. It's all about how one single decision, one line drawn on a map by the British, set off this incredible chain reaction. Think of it like a series of dominoes, where each one topples the next, completely changing the game for India's freedom struggle and paving the way for independence.
So, let's start with this big question. How on earth can just drawing a line on a map spark a full-blown revolution? I know, it sounds a little crazy, right? But that is exactly what happened in 1905. A single administrative choice by the British Viceroy, Lord Curzon, was literally the match that lit the fuse. See, this was never just about redrawing borders. It was a calculated political strike, and Indians saw right through it. They knew it was an attempt to crush their spirit. And, well, their response? It changed everything.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. We're going to follow the 5 key dominoes that fell. First up, we'll look at that line on the map, the Partition of Bengal. Then, the incredible reaction it caused, the people's answer, also known as the Swadeshi Movement. All that new energy, though, led to a major split. Our third domino, a house divided. This fracture then created 2 new paths, the bomb and the ballot. And finally, we'll see how World War I changed the entire landscape, creating a new world and a brand new fight. Let's jump in.
Okay, so domino number 1. It all starts here. In July of 1905, the Viceroy of India, Lord Curzon, announces he's going to split the Bengal presidency in 2. Now, you have to understand, Bengal wasn't just some random province. It was the absolute nerve center of Indian nationalism. It was the hub for new ideas, for culture, for resistance. It was massive, it was influential, and frankly, it was a huge pain in the neck for the British Raj.
So the official story the British sold was pretty straightforward. They said, look, Bengal has 78 million people. That's just too big to govern effectively. But nobody was buying it, because behind that clean, administrative excuse was a much darker game plan. It was the classic divide and rule strategy. The real goal was to break the back of Indian nationalism, and even more cleverly, to drive a wedge between Hindus and Muslims by creating a Hindu majority West and a Muslim majority East. It was a cold, calculated move to weaken the freedom struggle from the inside out.
But here's the thing. The British completely misread the room. Instead of crushing the nationalist spirit, the partition set it on fire. And that brings us to our second domino, which is maybe the most important of all, the people's answer. This decision sparked a massive, grassroots uprising called the Swadeshi Movement, and it rolled out a whole new playbook for how to fight back. At the core of this whole thing was the idea of Swadeshi, which just means of one's own country, and it was a call for self-reliance. On the surface, yeah, it was an economic fight. Boycott British goods, stop buying their cloth, their sugar, their salt. Instead, buy Indian-made products. But it was so much more than that. It was about psychology. It was about building Atma Shakti, or self-power. It was about breaking free from what one leader called the hypnotic conquest of the mind. It was India standing up and saying, you know what, we can do this on our own. And this just shows you how smart the movement was. It wasn't just about boycotts, it was a complete program for building a new nation from the ground up. You had huge public gatherings and marches that brought everyone together. You had these volunteer groups called samitis spreading the message to every corner. The movement pushed for national education to replace the colonial system, and it sparked a boom in Indian-owned businesses, everything from textile mills to soap factories. For the very first time, the Indian people were using their economic power as a political weapon on a massive scale. It was a real game changer.
And the cultural impact? It was huge. This was the moment when the great poet Rabindranath Tagore wrote Amar Sonar Bangla, My Golden Bengal. That song became the anthem of the movement. It just perfectly captured this deep, passionate love for the unified Bengali identity that the British were trying to destroy. And its power is so lasting that decades later, it became the national anthem of Bangladesh. So, you see, this wasn't just politics. It was a cultural awakening that fueled art, science, and literature, and it gave an entire generation an incredible sense of national pride.
Okay, on to our third domino. All of this intense, fiery energy from the Swadeshi movement had an unintended side effect. While it united people on the streets, it created huge cracks within the leadership of the Indian National Congress. The big question was, okay, what do we do with all this energy? And the fight over the answer literally ripped the organization in 2.
You can actually watch the whole thing unravel over 3 years. In 1905, in Benares, you see the first signs of trouble. The moderates, who were in charge, passed a pretty tame resolution against the partition. The extremists wanted something way more aggressive. Fast forward to 1906 in Calcutta, and the tension is much higher. They bring in the respected Dadabhai Naoroji as a compromise president to keep the peace. And it's here that Swaraj, or self-government, is declared the goal. But here's the catch. They didn't define what it meant, so both sides could pretend it meant what they wanted. But by 1907 in Surat, it all exploded. They couldn't even agree on a president. The meeting descended into total chaos, chairs were thrown, and the Indian National Congress officially split apart.
So what was the fight really about? Well, you had two totally different philosophies. On one side, you have the moderates. They believed in a slow, steady path to self-government within the British Empire. Their tools were petitions, debates, and pushing for small reforms. They believed in playing by the rules. Then you have the extremists, led by guys like Bal Gangadhar Tilak. They had zero faith left in British fairness. Their goal was complete Swaraj, total independence, and their methods were radical: passive resistance, boycotting everything connected to the colonial government, and getting the masses out on the streets for direct action. The bottom line is, the extremists just didn't believe the moderates' approach would ever work.
With the Congress split, a kind of political vacuum opened up, and that leads to our fourth domino, which is really a two-for-one. With the mainstream movement in disarray, things went in two very different directions at the same time. On one path, some disillusioned young nationalists gave up on protests and picked up the bomb. And on the other, the British saw their chance to use a mix of force and so-called reforms, the ballot, to try and get things back under control. So, frustrated with how slow everything was moving, secret revolutionary societies started popping up, especially in Bengal. Groups like the Anushilan Samiti began training young men for an armed struggle, and this led to political assassinations. The most famous case happened in Muzaffarpur in 1908. Two young revolutionaries, Prafulla Chaki and Khudiram Bose, tried to kill a notoriously brutal British magistrate. They threw a bomb, but they missed and hit the wrong carriage. Khudiram Bose was caught, tried, and hanged. He was only 18 years old and became one of India's most famous young martyrs. And this revolutionary spirit wasn't just in India. All the way over in San Francisco, the Ghadar Party formed with the goal of starting a massive armed rebellion back home. So how did the British react to all this? Well, they used a classic carrot-and-stick approach. They cracked down hard on the revolutionaries, but they tried to win over the moderates with something called the Morley-Minto reforms in 1909. It looked good on paper, more Indians in the legislative councils, but it was mostly for show. The British kept all the real power. And hidden inside these reforms was a poison pill: separate electorates for Muslims. This officially wrote religious division into India's political system, a move that would have absolutely devastating consequences down the line.
Then, in 1911, something pretty shocking happened. The British caved. At a huge ceremony in Delhi with King George V himself, they announced that the Partition of Bengal was cancelled. It was a massive victory for the Swadeshi protesters. It proved that if people stood together, they could actually force the British Empire to back down. But while the partition was gone, the damage of those reforms wasn't. The separate electorates were here to stay. And at that same ceremony, the British also announced they were moving the capital of India from Calcutta, the heart of all the rebellion, to the old imperial city of Delhi. It was a clear signal. They were trying to run away from the nationalist fire they had helped ignite. And that brings us to our final domino. The start of World War I in 1914 changed absolutely everything. Suddenly, the whole political chessboard was scrambled. The war showed that Britain wasn't invincible. For Indian nationalists, this was a moment of real opportunity. This new global crisis created the perfect opening for a powerful new demand for self-government, or as it came to be known, home rule. Two incredible leaders spearheaded this new push. First was Bal Gangadhar Tilak, who was finally out of prison. He started his Home Rule League in April 1916, focusing on his home base in Maharashtra and using local languages to spread the message of Swarajya. Just a few months later, Annie Besant, an Irish woman who had become a fierce supporter of Indian freedom, started her own league to cover the rest of the country. She was inspired by the Irish struggle for home rule and used her popular newspapers to get the word out. The movement just exploded in popularity, bringing old moderates and extremists back together. And when the British arrested Besant in 1917, it totally backfired, sparking even bigger protests.
This quote just perfectly sums up the spirit of 1916. It was a landmark year. At the Congress session in Lucknow, two huge things happened. First, the extremists, led by Tilak, were finally welcomed back into the Congress after nearly 10 years. Everyone realized that a divided movement was a weak one. And second, and this was even bigger, the Congress and the Muslim League signed the Lucknow Pact. They agreed on a joint list of demands to present to the British. Tilak's quote, "Better 2 united fists than 1,000 scattered fingers," says it all. For the first time, Hindus and Muslims were speaking with one voice. But, and this is a big but, to get that unity, the Congress agreed to officially accept the principle of separate electorates for Muslims. It was a decision that would have very, very complicated consequences later on.
So, when you look back at these 13 chaotic years, it's obvious they didn't end with independence. But they were absolutely essential. The Swadeshi movement literally wrote the playbook: boycott, passive resistance, self-reliance. But Mahatma Gandhi would later use to win freedom. It created a new, tougher generation of leaders and woke up the country in a way nothing had before. But it also left behind a very messy legacy. That British strategy of divide and rule, which was baked into the Morley-Minto reforms and then agreed to in the Lucknow Pact, carved deep divisions that would eventually lead to the tragedy of partition in 1947. So it leaves us with a tough question to think about. Was this whole era a necessary, painful education for India, forging the weapons it would need for the final battle? Or was it a tragic detour that started a fire of division that could never truly be put out?